Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I think the key in examining Trump is actually what will he do when people present him with facts. For instance, it sounds a little esoteric, but the World Trade Organization, which the United States is a member of, very important, allows us to file complaints of unfair trade practices. And there's a meeting in the Oval Office, and the president says, well, the World Trade Organization is the worst organization ever. We lose all our cases. And they present data.
No.
Pardon? Showing
I said, no, we actually win most of our cases there.
Yeah. Like 85.7% of them. Not just 85%, but 85.7%. And he says, no, that's not true. And the people there say, look, call the U.S. trade representative, your guy, and you will confirm this. I don't want to hear. I don't want to call him. I don't want to deal with it. And at some point, he gets literally where the aides ask, where did you get these ideas? And he will say, well, I've had them for 30 years. They're right, and if you disagree, you're wrong.
Yeah. So, did you hear when you interviewed all of people staff members and acquaintances and people that were close to his orbit, any concern about Donald Trump's well-being mentally, or did they just believe that he's got a deficient personality that can't handle the truth?
Happily, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I don't dig into that. What matters to people is the performance as president. And when you dig into this and excavate it, again, you find people are worried about the performance, the inability to grow, the inability to listen, the inability to change his mind. And so you have a situation, I make this point, but I think a real ardent Trump supporter would go through this and say, gee, maybe I like Trump and some of the things, but this is not the way to manage the government.
Yeah, well, I know you're not a psychiatrist. I'm just curious if anybody expressed concern to you while you were interviewing them that he may not have the mental capabilities to be president of the United States.
Well, I demonstrate scene after scene how he deals with reality and data. And in the course of it, in one National Security Council meeting, he's so worked up about how much money we are spending with troops, American troops abroad in South Korea or in Europe, and he thinks we're being cheated. And finally, the Secretary of Defense, Mattis, when Trump is, why are we doing this? What do we get out of it? Mattis says, we're trying to prevent World War III. Because Mattis, at this point, is so frustrated, has to communicate and tell the president, and this is a year into office, this is not the first week, literally has to tell him, we're trying to prevent World War III. Now, can you imagine the secretaries of defense we've had, say Bob Gates, having to tell George W. Bush or Barack Obama that actually our job is to prevent World War III?
It is Thursday, the 13th of September of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. That's right, folks, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Oh, my. Oh, there's a big hurricane hitting the eastern seaboard as we speak. And, well, don't worry about it. Because, it'll just go away. It'll go away on its own accord. It's God's will. Don't worry. Pray. Yeah, well, hopefully people who are hunkered down stay hunkered down, and I hope you're safe. And I have a few friends who live in the region, not necessarily right at the front of it, but in the region. So they're going to be impacted quite a bit as well. So, okay, well, apparently Trump says that 3,000 people did not die on Puerto Rico because of the hurricane, because he says so. People are not dead until Trump says they're dead. All right? I mean, he is sent from God on high to judge the quick and the dead, isn't he? And what's up with the NRA putting a KKK hood on the little train that could? Jeez, what coolish monsters. Yeah, well, it's the same kind that would steal money from the Coast Guard, from FEMA, from every aspect of our government so they can put it into building baby gulags. And I keep telling everybody that if you're in cahoots with a hostile foreign power, what better way to soften up America than letting a few storms come in and batter the hell out of people? And what's up with Waffle House having a weather command center? Waffle House! Well, the old saying goes, if you've ever worked at Waffle House, the old saying is, when the irons are hot, now's the time to batter them. And they do. All right, well, enough of that. I mean, we have actually a show curated for you today because we're a salon. We're a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we're right here in the Bistro Cafe part of it right now. Yeah, that was Bob Woodward at the top explaining, yes, indeed, Trump just doesn't believe in facts because facts disagree with his opinions. Yes. Since he said on God on high to judge the quick and the dead. Of course, everything that comes out of his mouth is correct, is right. And you know what? He believes that. Now, some people would call that psychotic. And other people, usually acolytes or devotees, would call it, oh, he is inspirational, isn't he? Look how strong and assured he is. He commands the space. Yeah, well, he can only command the space truly if he can make the trains run on time. And that guy can't do it. All right? And that's what's scary. What happens if they get a demagogue like Trump, but one who can get the trains to run on time? Yeah, we're in big trouble then. And the only way to stop that? Yeah. Well, it's not the only way, but the best way, I believe, is through, just vote the mothers out. In overwhelming numbers, they can only work the margins. They can only work the margins. All right. Well, enough of that rant. Like I said, we have a curated show for you today. And what else is on the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Oh, Holocaust deniers are advertising on the Bay Area Rapid Transit system, and San Francisco transit officials say they have no choice but to allow the ads. I lived in the Bay Area for, about 35 years, and this is not the first time this has come up. And they always say the same thing every single time until they find out, we don't actually have to have this hate speech up. Assholes. All right. Well, everybody has to reinvent the wheel now, don't they? The GOP schemes to sabotage Obamacare one more time before the midterms. And the feds zero in on suspicious money transfers after the Trump Tower meeting with Don Jr. and the Russians. That's going to be in my new surf band. Don Jr. and the Russians will play like really cool, like Leica and the Cosmonauts type surf music. Yeah. Hopefully Leica and the Cosmonauts don't get mad. I hear they do. After the break, we moved to the chef's table where ABC spiked an anti-Trump Blackish episode, then made sure the script was wiped from the planet. And Les Moonves wasn't even involved in that one. And archaeologists say abstract markings on a small stone flake discovered in a South African cave is the oldest known human drawing. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link, diligently monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And check out Kelly's show At the Table on Saturdays in the afternoon, early evening. And then later on, she teams up with Ricky for the Round Table Roundhouse Power Hour. So check that out. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the Patreon button. Can you become a Patreon of Resistance Radio so that we can continue resisting the way that, we were meant to resist? And that's with paying our bills. That's the first one right there. And we are truly unable to do this without you. So every little bit helps. There are various tiers that you could contribute to and become a Patreon, and those are there at the links provided. There's a link right there at the bottom of the homepage. And thank you for your generosity. We are truly unable to do this without you. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Check us out over on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And as I mentioned, the show notes and links diaries on Daily Co's, I can be found as Justice Putnam there. Check the show out on Facebook, and we can also be followed on Twitter at Cookbook West. Podcasts of the show can be found by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, TuneIn, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Well, this first article here by Luke Barnes out of Think Progress has a maddening quality to it. And I alluded to that a bit at the top, because this is not a new phenomena, okay? It's not as if Holocaust deniers, anti-Semites, the usual suspects do this on the transit system, and they're up for a little bit. And usually, I gotta say, what happens in the beginning is that the people who ride the train are so offended they start, marking up the thing or covering it. I saw it simply covered with a sheet a few times, some of these ads. Others just put up their own ads over it. Like Stop Hate, that kind of thing. All right. I don't know. Maybe now those people would be taken to, out in the hills of Livermore and shot. Maybe that's what would happen now. Or could it be something that could happen? Yeah, we want to stop that. And what do they call it? Nip it in the bud. A notorious Holocaust denial group that has been classified as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center is being allowed to advertise on the San Francisco Bay Area's metro system. Well, actually, it's not San Francisco's Bay Area system. It's not San Francisco's. It's the Bay Area's system. San Francisco has their own municipal transit system called Muni. That's San Francisco's. But BART is the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. It's just, let's be clear. This is not as confusing as New York politics, okay? Where you have about 800 different kinds of flavors of Democrats. And then the Greens come in just to muck things up about 1 or 2%. Okay, it's not as complex as that. 2 ads from the Institute for Historical Review proclaiming history matters are on display in 2 Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART, stations. Since its founding in 1978 by Willis Carto, the Institute for Historical Review has consistently pushed anti-Semitism and Holocaust denialism, including claims that Anne Frank's diary was a hoax and the concentration camps' gas chambers were simply delousing showers. And what was the beheading of Sophie Scholl? Dare tell us that, sir, because that's only codified in the crimes that were punished by Herr Führer in the Third Reich. BART officials took pains to say they did not endorse the message, but were powerless to stop it, since it fell under the protection of free speech rights. We cannot deny the ads, BART spokesman Alicia Trost told The Guardian. There is plenty of case law and court rulings that show if you deny the ad, you can be taken to court and you'll lose, and that's obviously costly. Well, listen to me. You put aside money for errors and omissions, legal settlements all the time, okay? I think that you're covered. Several other metro operators have been taken to court for precisely this reason. Last August, the ACLU took the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority to court for refusing a number of ads, including one by right-wing provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos. Well. And in 2015, a judge ruled that New York's MTA could not stop an ad from being run that read, "Killing Jews is worship that draws us close to Allah." That ad was created by a pro-Israel organization whose president, Pamela Geller, is a well-known Islamophobe. Yeah, that's nice. Nonetheless, the new posters at BART are a worrying sign of the rising anti-Semitism in the U.S. In February, a report from the Anti-Defamation League showed that hate crimes and discrimination against Jews had risen 57% from the previous year, reaching the highest number in 20 years. And Joseph A. Greenblatt, the ADL's chief executive, said that white supremacists have felt emboldened since the presidential election, and that the divisive state of our national discourse also had a role in allowing anti-Semitism to spread again. A. Martin of Share Blue Media brings us his next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Man cannot live by, meat and potatoes alone. Please. Well, it looks like House Republicans are planning to delay key Obamacare provisions at a cost of $50 billion, which will cause 1 million Americans to lose health insurance. Yeah, right before the midterms. Republicans' determination to tear health care away from even more Americans seems to know no bounds. After at least 70 failed attempts to repeal Obamacare thus far, House Repugs, Repugs is in this reporter's opinion. I have a license. Right here, it's in my back pocket. House Repugs are preparing to vote on yet another bill that would sabotage the popular Affordable Care Act. The changes will leave up to 1 million Americans without health insurance. And in addition to ripping health care away from families, the CBO announced that the Republican sabotage effort will cost more than $50 billion. Well, that'll stimulate the economy of a few yacht builders. Deceptively called Save America's Workers Act, that would delay the ACA's employer mandate penalty, which took effect in 2015, during the black guys' years. We got to forget about that. In fact, let's take every aspect of that administration off, every edifice. In fact, let's destroy all the edifices, too. We'll make our own. The mandate covers companies with at least 100 workers. Additionally, the bill would change the definition of a full-time employee to someone who works, 40 hours a week, whereas the current requirement is 30 hours. Critics of the bill note the changes to employment status will incentivize employers to create more part-time positions than full-time ones. That way you can have 4 or 5 jobs that are all part-time and never get health benefits. I remember those days. By increasing the requirement to be considered a full-time employee, Republicans have found yet another way to sabotage America's health care and make it clear they remain obsessed with trying to increase the number of uninsured workers. The bill follows a slew of other attempts by Republicans to weaken health care policy. In 2017, Republicans in the House voted to gut Obamacare with a bill that would have caused 23 million people to lose access to health insurance. Now it's only 1 million. See, it's better. That sabotage effort included harmful provisions directed at individuals with pre-existing conditions as well as older Americans. I thought that was their base. What are they doing? I guess you always hurt the ones you love and the ones that love you. The GOP bill would have allowed insurance companies to charge people significantly more if they had a pre-existing condition like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, arthritis, or just merely the fact of being born. And that possibly requiring people to pay thousands of dollars extra every year to remain insured. Oh, you mean like the good old days? Republicans also wanted to institute an age tax on people aged 50 to 64 who were too young for Medicare. The provision would have raised health care costs for those individuals by thousands of dollars per year. Wow. Even though House Republicans celebrated this bill, it failed to pass the Senate. Nevertheless, Republicans managed to sneak other provisions sabotaging the ACA into the unpopular tax scam bill. As a direct result of those sabotage measures, as well as other sabotage efforts by the Trump administration, healthcare premiums are skyrocketing next year. If the Republicans had left the ACA alone, premiums would have dropped next year instead. Healthcare is top of mind for voters across the country as the 2018 midterms approach, according to the polling from the Kaiser Family Foundation. And the upcoming House vote will put health care policy back in the spotlight less than 2 months before the election. Well, like I said, It's a demagogue who doesn't know how to make the trains run on time. Wait until they find one who can. National security reporter from Share Blue Media, Carolyn Orr, brings us this last offering here. At the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, investigators are following the money, and the trail is leading them right to the doorstep of the Trump campaign. Federal investigators are scrutinizing a series of suspicious money transfers involving several of the planners and participants in the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting between senior Trump campaign officials and a Russian lawyer promising to deliver dirt on Hillary Clinton. Some of these transactions, which show money from Russia and Switzerland being transferred to banks in the British Virgin Islands, Bangkok, and New Jersey, caught the eye of bank examiners who found the transactions to be suspicious. You know, FinCEN, the part that Trump wants to get rid of. Get rid of all of the Russian experts out of the FBI and the DOJ who have been convicting Russian oligarchs for mob activity. Get rid of all the bank examiners who find suspicious money transactions that could be money laundering. Get rid of them. Okay? Well, investigators are now focusing on two bursts of banking activity, one of which took place immediately after the June 9th, 2016 meeting, and another that took place right after the presidential election. Both of the suspicious bursts of activity involve billionaire heiress Agalarov, a real estate developer with close ties to Trump and Vlad. The first set of transactions came just 11 days after the Trump Tower meeting. In that incident, an offshore company ran by Agalarov wired a $19.5 million to his personal account at a bank in New York. The second burst of suspicious activity started on November 21st, 2016, when Agalarov transferred $1.2 million from the Agalarov family bank in Russia to a New Jersey checking account belonging to the billionaire's son, supposed rock star Ehrman. Well, the New Jersey account was opened in 2012 but had been dormant since the summer of 2015. Bank examiners found it suspicious that the account suddenly became active and started to grow after Trump's election. In total, the Agalarov family bank account in Russia made 19 separate wire transfers to the New Jersey checking account between November of 2016 and July of 2017. The New Jersey account also transferred money to a company owned by Irakli Kavaladze, a longtime associate of the Agalarov family who represented them at the Trump Tower meeting. Well, Kavaladze had previously been investigated for money laundering and also has close business ties to Ehrman Aglarov's British publicist, Rob Goldstone. Yeah, that fatuous guy, who first raised the idea of the meeting with the Trump campaign. Well, the suspicious transactions were uncovered after federal law enforcement officials asked financial institutions to look through records of people connected to Special Counsel Mueller's Russia probe. Bank examiners filed a series of suspicious activity reports and then turned them over to the Treasury Department's FinCEN network, which then shared them with the FBI, the IRS, congressional committees investigating Russian interference, and members of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team. Well, while it remains unclear whether the newly uncovered financial transactions and subsequent investigations will lead to criminal charges, one thing is crystal clear. Investigators are following the money, and the trail leads them right to Donnie Two Scoops. Let's be clear about that. Okay, we better get on to our break, and when we come back, we'll go through weather from around the world, and then we're going to finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Climate change means springtime's arriving earlier across North America, but the season's onset isn't changing at the same rate across the nation.
Spring is not advancing as quickly in southern regions as it is in northern regions.
Eric Waller, a biogeographer at the U.S. Geological Survey. He and his team analyzed more than 100 years of data on when the first leaves and flowers emerge across North America each spring. And they found that although spring has sprung earlier nearly everywhere, in certain wildlife refuges, the season hits extremely early. And that mismatch could be a problem for migratory birds, who might leave their temperate overwintering grounds down south at the usual time, only to find out they've arrived up north too late.
Their food resources might be withering, and they might not have as much food available to them, and that could affect their reproduction, their breeding.
The analysis is in the journal PLOS ONE. The upshot? It may be more difficult than we thought to predict the effects of climate change on migratory birds. But the data might also help land managers decide which plots of land to acquire, to augment existing reserves, and in doing so, ensure that even later birds still get the worm. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day the 3 Mile Island Unit 2 reactor partially melted down near Middletown, Pennsylvania. A combination of equipment failure and human error has long been attributed as the cause of the meltdown. An initial overheating and reactor shutdown had occurred, but a pressure valve remained stuck open, allowing coolant to escape. Design flaws in control equipment failed to indicate the position of the valve. Workers then mistook the increased pressure as a result of the excess coolant. They shut off the emergency water system that could have cooled the core. Fears of radiation release and hydrogen bubbles led to voluntary evacuations that included over 140,000 residents. Authorities assured the public that the partial meltdown had been contained. President Carter convened a commission to investigate the causes. It concluded that while the operators took inappropriate actions, the training they received was inadequate, as were the procedures they were required to follow. Plant designers Babcock and Wilcox were held responsible for poor design. The company failed to notify operators of repeated valve failure and a previous near duplicate of the potential catastrophe at the Davis-Besse plant. Metropolitan Edison, General Public Utilities, and the NRC were also held responsible for poor quality control, poor maintenance, communication lapses, and poor training. Fears regarding public health and safety intensified, fueling health studies of those exposed and the anti-nuclear power movement. The aftermath brought about sweeping changes involving emergency response planning, reactor operator training, human factors, engineering, radiation protection, and many other areas of nuclear plant power operations. It also caused the NRC to tighten and heighten its regulatory oversight. All of these changes significantly enhanced U.S. reactor safety. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Hurricane Florence has been downgraded to a Category 2 storm, but is still considered an extremely dangerous weather event that could bring catastrophic flooding to the region and dump as much as 40 inches of rain across the Carolinas.
Going down to a Category 2 status means absolutely nothing. The rain is still going to be the same. More rain in a 3-day period than Washington, D.C. picks up all year. The surge is still going to be the same. We're still going to have massive waves crashing on shore and well inland. The only thing coming down to a Category 2 means the winds are not going to be as strong. However, the winds, this was never about the winds. It's always been about water, water, water. The other thing that we can take away from this, going down to a 2 right now, the only other factor is, okay, Hazel still will be the strongest to ever hit North Carolina. Hugo will always be the strongest in the last 29 years. We don't want to break those records anyway. We're only 1 mile per hour off from Category 3. This is the latest track. The National Hurricane Center wants to bring it in a little early now, 8 in the morning, as a Category 2. Remember, this could still get to 3. Let me back up just a moment. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans as a Category 3. We're just about there. When it came out of the Gulf, it was a Category 5. The water underneath Katrina created, even though it made landfall as a 3, a record 28-foot storm surge. Early this morning, a wave height reported in that northeastern quadrant was 83 feet. That staggers the imagination. All right? So the wall of water is still underneath this storm. The surge is going to be the same. The threat for loss of life and loss of property does not change. So do not pay attention to these numbers. It never was about that. It was about where the storm has come from, how strong it is, the vulnerable coastline, and the massive slowdown. That has not changed. So the rainfall rates are going to be staggering, a couple of inches an hour for several days. We could see over 10 inches a day for a couple of days. So that 40 inch total is going to be met in many locations. So the threat for loss of life from flooding, from storm surge is still with us.
CBS News and other media outlets reported that an airport runway on Puerto Rico was carpeted with 20,000 pallets of bottled water, now contaminated, stacked under blue tarps. The water never made it to hurricane survivors when many had been forced to resort last year to drinking out of contaminated pipes. Social media exploded with finger-pointing and heated debates about who was to blame.
This all started actually yesterday when a member of the local law enforcement posted a picture on social media out of frustration saying, "Can you believe this?" Another example of sort of the failed response. And we went, and it was not hard to find, some 20,000 pallets of bottled water. By our back-of-the-envelope math, that's about 38 million bottles of water, or 10 for every resident of Puerto Rico or so, just sitting there, baking in the sun. Apparently, FEMA started delivering to that airstrip back in the fall, October or November or so. They didn't start distributing it until May, and then some residents complained of a foul odor and taste, unsure whether it came that way or it got that way after sitting in the sun for months in the heat down there. But then that prompted more water testing, And it's just been a sort of a perfect storm of logistical nightmares. And this is such a glaring example of how emergency management is so much about logistics. And I couldn't help think back to all the folks I saw a month after the storm drinking rainwater, drinking creek water, and all the very solid, earnest National Guardsmen and FEMA workers who brought that water down here, thinking that they were going to save lives and help lives. But a lesson unlearned, regardless of the president's A+ grade yesterday.
Senate Republican leaders are eyeing an end of September vote on Brett Kavanaugh, Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh on Wednesday night released his 263 pages of written responses to more than 1,000 written questions from Democrats. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow explains that one line of questioning had to do with Kavanaugh's finances and the possibility that he has a gambling problem.
Well, tonight, as I said, we're starting to go through Brett Kavanaugh's responses. I will tell you on these debt and financial questions, to all of them, he gives the same answer. And his answer is, please see my response to question 11. His response to question 11 is very long. He gives a lengthy explanation of his finances, including how expensive it is to maintain an old house. I'll read you a little piece of that. He says, I have truthfully provided financial information in conjunction with this nomination process and my service in the judicial and executive branches since I graduated from law school. I've worked in public service for 25 of those 28 years. For most of my wife's years of paid employment, she likewise has been a federal, state, or local government worker. During that time, I filed regular financial disclosure reports as required by law. The federal government's required disclosure reports list broad ranges for one's assets and debt as of one day or period in time. As of this time, my wife and I have no debts other than our home mortgage. We have the following assets, and then he lists a house minus the mortgage, a bank account, a car that we own, a car that we lease. He also says, quote, I have not had gambling debts or participated in fantasy leagues.
And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener funded, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Thursday, September 13th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. The G20 is a group of governments which works internationally to address questions such as economic stability during crises like the recession of 2008. It is paralleled by the L20, the Labour 20. At the beginning of September, the G20 labor and employment ministers met in Argentina with representatives of the L20 labor group. I talked to Pierre Habar about the meeting. Mr. Habar is the General Secretary of the Trade Union Advisory Committee of the OECD. TUAC just recently had its 70th anniversary. I asked Mr. Habar about the meeting of the labor and government representatives in the L and G20 groups.
At the outset, it's perhaps important to highlight that the G20 as a whole, that there is perhaps a changing role for that forum. It was created in its current format back in 2008, 2009, right after, in response to the global financial crisis. At that time, it was very much about coordinating economic policy, coordinating government action to exit the crisis. Since then, it has gradually become a forum for setting broad principles for reform, broad principles for structural reforms, and also to lay out the key issues that pave the ways for us when it comes to future challenges, digitalization, climate change, and so on. So we engaged with the employment ministerial, which met in Mendoza last week. What we did is, with a statement, we reasserted the basics of what the labor movement has been calling and is calling and is about: right to collective bargaining, robust minimum wages, coverage of social protection, responsible business conduct, responsible business in global supply chain, and address new challenges, migration, climate change, and engage with the ministers on the future work, the challenges associated with non-standard forms of work. In the end, what we did with the G20, we engaged on all those issues, but we also reminded the employment ministers, and beyond that, the G20, the initial mandate of this forum, which is to get our economies back on track, because 10 years after the crisis, we are still far away from a recovery in employment when it comes to quality of employment and quantity. And the major constraint that we're facing today is the unresolved issue of rising inequality. In many countries, wage growth is flat. And the main barrier to sustainable growth is indeed constraints that are on wages. So with that, we've been having a dual message, a two-track proposition to the employment ministers. First of all, yes, indeed, discuss the broad principles for growth, collective bargaining, minimum wage, social protection, and so on, but also take action now to address effectively the fall of the labor share of income, which is at the heart of the rise of inequality, and explain why today in many countries wage growth is flat 10 years after the crisis.
As you mentioned, the future of work was raised in the G20, L20 meetings. What issues were raised?
The future of work is a broad term that is used to address all the employment and labor challenges associated with digital transformation and the combination of digitalization and globalization. There is obviously a quantitative aspect to that conversation. Where are the new jobs to be created? It is not the first time, and I guess it's not the last time, that the labor movement will have to face such a technological change, a technological leap. We have faced these changes in the past. What characterizes this digital transformation, and that's why there's so much conversation around this future of work term, is that when you combine digitalization with globalization, well, it does pose not only quantitative issues, but also qualitative aspects, because with digitalization, in many instances, you allow employers to keep control of workers, to keep supervision of workers via data exploitation, but at arm's length. And hence, digitalization, to a large extent, allow employers to escape their employer responsibilities.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker delivered his State of the European Union speech on Wednesday, a rough equivalent of America's yearly State of the Union. Juncker tackled some of the EU's foremost challenges, telling the United Kingdom that by voting to leave the EU, the country would have to forego some of Europe's top economic benefits.
Someone who leaves the Union cannot be in the same privileged position as a member state. If you leave the Union, you are, of course, no longer part of our single market, and certainly not only in parts of it.
Juncker also drew a line in the sand over democratic backsliding in Hungary, even backing plans to sanction member states if they fail to uphold the rule of law. And of course, the EU is a complex bureaucracy with multiple power centers, meaning Juncker hardly calls all of the shots. But even so, Zofia Rosak, a researcher in the Institutions Unit of the Center for European Policy Studies, says it's a good thing Juncker tries to articulate a broad European Union agenda.
He's not the president of the EU. There is no such post. But for, let's say, the ordinary citizen, it is quite difficult to understand the very sophisticated and complicated institutional architecture of the EU. So I think it is very helpful if there's one figure who takes up that opportunity of that speech to speak with a united EU tongue a little bit.
With just 8 months left on the job, it's unlikely Juncker will spearhead many new policies. Instead, Rosak said his words aim to describe the EU's value in a changing world, where challenges increasingly require cooperative solutions.
To break it down very simply, I think it's just that, we live in a world of insecurity and uncertainty, and the allies that stood up for us in the past are not as reliable as they used to be, and also we have new challenges with, massive migration and so on. So we have to defend our borders internally and externally, and we have to organize ourselves. Nobody else is doing that for us anymore.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Weather from around the world always begins along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, 43 degrees? That's not the low 50s that we were slated to have. Well, we are going to go up to the mid-70s today. Mostly sunny and fair. Right now the winds are out of the north about 2 miles per hour. Will remain light and variable throughout the day and the night and tomorrow coming out of the north. So I guess we have shifted a little bit more into our fall slide, and a nice slide it will be indeed. Dry conditions will continue, though we will have increasing chances of rain through tomorrow and the weekend. Maybe a smattering. I don't think it's going to stick. Ragweed pollen is rated as moderate. The air quality index is good, hovered just up to 38 parts per million. I expect that to come down a little bit rather than go back up. And the daytime UV index is high at 6. Pressure is falling at 30.28 inches. Visibility is 8 miles. And relative humidity is 87%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 68 degrees and sunny. Paris, yes indeed, is 64 and cloudy. They're having fall now too. Rome is 79 and partly cloudy, though they have a thunderstorm electrical storm advisory, so take care there. Kiev is 69 and fair. Kabul is 73 and fair. Hong Kong is 78 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 72 degrees with rain. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees, partly cloudy, with a smoke advisory for the wildfire that just happened there. Hopefully they'll knock that one down. And New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. Hurricane weather is just creeping their way. And that is Weather from Around the World, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Bob Brigham of Raw Story brings us this first offering here at the chef's table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. That's right, folks. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. The American Broadcasting Company, ABC, refused to air an episode of the television show Blackish that criticized Donald Trump. Emmy-nominated showrunner Kenya Barris explained in a New Hollywood Reporter interview. ABC, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, it's a small world after all, isn't it? Shelved the episode despite it costing more than the usual episode budget of $3 million. The costs included hiring Spike Lee for voice-over work on the episode. Wait till that goes to cable. The episode, titled Please Baby Please, had the show's patriarch telling his son a bedtime story that reflected upon his first year of life. Anthony Anderson, the actor who plays the lead male role, slammed the decision. He'd given his blood, sweat, and tears to the episode, which they had signed off on every step of the way, from the outline to the script to the table read, to the point where they actually spent the money in the episode. Anderson, who was also an executive producer, explained, and I don't know what those conversations were, but we entered into this partnership with the understanding that we would be able to tell the stories that we wanted to tell. The episode reportedly included news footage of Trump, the fatal Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, and the NFL kneeling protest started by Colin Kaepernick. Bob Iger, the CEO of the Walt Disney Company, it's a small world after all, reportedly personally intervened despite being sick with laryngitis. He had to rasp his way through that denial, didn't he? Every cast member, even cast members have been unable to see the completed episode, and one top rep said the script had been wiped from the planet. Executives at ABC, more than any other network, have been forthright about their desire for more red state programming since Trump's win. And with Barris's latest episode, they feared they'd be alienating the very population they tried so hard to court. Well, apparently Disney World is not Nike. You know, Nike's stock is going up through the roof. That Disney brass wouldn't want to poke Trump himself, just as the company was seeking Justice Department approval of his acquisition of most of 21st Century Fox, is widely believed to have been a factor as well. We knew people would talk about it, Barris noted. Since ABC reportedly spiked the episode, Barris has taken the show from ABC Studios to Netflix.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Will Dunham helps us finish out here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and he writes for Reuters. A small stone flake marked with intersecting lines of red ochre pigment some 73,000 years ago that was found in a cave on South Africa's southern coast represents what archaeologists call the oldest known example of human drawing. The abstract design, vaguely resembling a hashtag, was drawn by hunter-gatherers who periodically dwelled in Blombos Cave overlooking the Indian Ocean, roughly 190 miles east of Cape Town. It predates the previous oldest known drawings by at least 30,000 years. While the design appears rudimentary, the fact that it was sketched so long ago is significant. The existence of modern cognitive abilities in our species suggests Homo sapiens, during a time known as the Middle Stone Age, were able to draw such abstract designs. The crosshatch design, drawn with ochre, a pigment used by our species dating back at least 285,000 years ago, consists of a set of 6 straight lines crossed by 3 slightly curved lines. Wow, that's a really complex tic-tac-toe. We're more complex than we give ourselves credit for. We would be hesitant to call it art. It is definitely an abstract design, and it almost certainly had some meaning to the maker and probably formed a part of the common symbolic system understood by other people in the group. Maybe they were counting. Other Blombos Cave artifacts of similar age included ochre pieces engraved with abstract patterns resembling the one drawn on the stone, as well as ochre-covered shell beads. Blombos Cave artifacts dating from 100,000 years ago included a red ochre-based paint. All these findings demonstrate that early Homo sapiens in the Southern Cape used different techniques to produce similar signs on different media. This observation supports the hypothesis that these signs were symbolic in nature and represented an inherent aspect of the advanced cognitive abilities these early African Homo sapiens, the ancestors of all of us today. Well, see, We are first artists, and then we become monsters, I think. Let's get out of here. Is the end of our broadcast period for the day. Of course, Netroots Radio broadcasts breaking news throughout the day. We'll visit with you tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio throughout the day for all that breaking news. We'll visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.